first lesson, I introduced the basic Zhangzhuang postures, which are also called health postures. This is the second lesson. We will start explaining some Shi Li exercises. You should know that in Master Yao program, you're learning all kinds of the training methods from the very beginning. It's different to some other schools where you first just practice Zhangzhuang for some months before you start Shi Li for some months, and only after this, after some time, you start Fa Li, and then again after some time next exercises. In Master Yao program, in the first module, you have health postures, you have combat postures, you have Shi Li, you have Fa Li, and you have Tui Shou, pushing hands. First module is what you normally, when training regularly, let's say twice a week, learning this way, you would learn during the first month of your each one learning, each one study. Or one weekend seminar, or like first 2 days of intensive summer or winter course at our Yiquan Academy. So, some people doing other branches of each one will tell you that you need to practice Zhangzhuang before you will be prepared to start learning Shi Li. You need to learn Shi Li for some longer time before you will be prepared to practice Fa Li and so on. Master Yao program is different. Of course, when you start learning those next kind of more advanced training methods, it's not possible to do them in advanced way with deep feeling, deep understanding. But this way, when we introduce some simplified variants of those more advanced methods, you will at least be able to get some idea what they are about. This way, you better understand even the most basic practice. You better understand Zhangzhuang when you get at least some idea about those next methods. So, after those 3 basic Zhangzhuang exercises, so-called health postures, Tuo Bao, Cheng Bao, and Xiu Xi Zhuang, next will be 3 very basic Shi Li exercises. In our standard program, we have 12 standard Shi Li movements. Of course, when you practice later, any movement, free movement, also will become Shi Li. So you're not limited just to some 12 movements. But those 12 movements are those exercises from which you will start. And those 12 exercises can be divided into 4 groups. 3 exercises in each group. You don't need to be very strict about this. It's just some way of putting those exercises in some groups. It could be done in different ways, so you don't need to care too much. But sometimes it might be something which helps you to remember what you actually learned. So, if we divide those 12 Shi Li exercises into 4 groups, there will be 3 Shi Li exercises in each of them. The first group is so-called basic Shi Lis. 3 basic Shi Lis. Then there are 3 so-called Tui Shou Shi Lis. Tui Shou, pushing hands, because those are movements closely related to pushing hands exercises. Those are some movements which you practice with partner. Then there are 3 so-called Sanshou drills. Sanshou, which means free fighting. Those are so-called splitting, chopping methods, movements which are very often used in free fighting. Then there are 3 so-called Shenfa drills. Shenfa, which means body method, are drills in which you concentrate on more complex body movement than in those more complex, more advanced, more demanding body movement than in those previous groups. So we will start from so-called basic drills. 3 basic drills. And we will practice them first in so-called Ping-Bu position and then in so-called Ding-Pa-Bu position. So first, Ping-Bu. Ping-Bu is this position of your feet when they are on one line, toes pointing slightly outward. This you should remember from the first lesson. This is Ping-Bu. So we will start those basic drills in Ping-Bu position. Then we will do them also in Ding-Pa-Bu position, which I will explain later. Next drills from next groups will be introduced already in Ding-Pa-Bu position. There will be no need to do them in Ping-Bu position. You put them in Ping-Bu position, but this is not very important. If you would like to practice them, those more advanced drills in Ping-Bu position, you could do this, and you should be able to understand how to do it by yourself. But basically, there's not such a need. There is no need to do too many exercises. Still, there are quite many of them in our training program, material training program. So no need to make even more. But sometimes it's like some people might have problem with something, so there might be some need to do some additional exercise, maybe some simplified exercise. In Ping-Bu position, basically, it's simpler, it's easier than in Ding-Pa-Bu. It's not so complex. But when you learn the basic drills in Ping-Bu position, then you practice them also in Ding-Pa-Bu position. Then when next drills are introduced, you start them from Ding-Pa-Bu position. This will not be something new because you already practiced this for some time. During regular study, it will be like 2-3 months. Of course, if it's an intensive course, everything comes much faster. You learn those methods faster. But then when you practice at home, okay, you know all those methods, but you could again go through them gradually, focusing on those more basic, gradually moving to those more advanced. Even with those a little bit more advanced, maybe you will repeat them just a little bit, just not to forget to have idea how to do them, but you will not focus on them too much at the beginning. First things first, but it doesn't need to be completely linear. This. You can learn first step, second step, third step, fourth step at once, but still first you focus on the first step, but you already have some idea about next steps, which will help you to practice the most basic things in a more efficient way, because you will better understand them. You will understand why are you doing them, for which next steps they must prepare. So, talking about those 3 basic drills, In this lesson, first of them, this one is called punctuation. Pingbu, punctuation. Pingbu, because we practice in this position. Pingtwei, ping means something even, level, twei, pushing. This is the name of this exercise. Now, some difference between Shili and Zhanzhuang. You remember already from the first lesson that in Zhanzhuang we practice in so-called Mo Li, not only standing, but practicing this very short movement in non-movement, coordinating mind with body, feeling some forces, developing the feeling of those forces, of this strength. Shili is something similar, but the movement becomes bigger, longer. So it is said that Zhanzhuang is kind of shortened Shili, and Shili is like Zhanzhuang expanded in space. Basically, you're practicing almost the same things, but the difference is that in Zhanzhuang, very short movement. Sometimes, if you can feel this, it's like just one point taken from the whole longer movement. And Shili is point by point, moving from one point to another. This way, it becomes longer movement. Moli means like feeling strength. More like you're trying to feel something with your palm, like you close your eyes, for example, or you try to feel something with your palm. This is mo. Mo li, mo ji, feeling force, feeling strength. Shi li means testing force, testing strength. So, of course, it's not like testing how many kilos you are able to lift, but it's testing if in the movement you are able to maintain this feeling of some force, some strength, which you started developing through Mo Li in Zhanzhuang postures. If you are able to feel this at any point of this movement, if you are keeping it in your whole body, this is the idea of Shi Li. Feeling this strength, having this idea, this feeling, having so-called Yizhong Zhi Li, which means force in mind, force in intention, in intent, in will. You have this in mind, but at the same time you staying relaxed. Now people very often ask if you should be completely relaxed. No, this is not about being completely relaxed. In the first lesson I was explaining that relaxing doesn't mean completely relax, loose, but removing unnecessary tension. Now, if you work with both Moli and Shili, idea of some force, your body reacts, your muscles react. Apart from keeping you in some position, okay, they are activated to do some action. So it's not like they're being completely relaxed, but they're almost completely relaxed, just slightly activated. So there's idea of this force, but it doesn't create tension. It doesn't create stiffness. This is how you should practice. So it is said, Yung yi pu yung li. Use mind, don't use force. So, typical beginner doing something, just doing it like normal movement, and also if thinking about some force, tension active. And it should be using your mind, creating feeling, and your body following this feeling. Like one force is moving your body. It's not like you're trying to use your force, physical brute force, called Zhuoli, clumsy force, clumsy strength. But this so-called internal force, internal strength. Okay, so you have idea of overcoming some resistance, but you don't tense. But your whole body becomes unified. Your mind and body together become unified. This is the important part of this practice. 并不并归实力. Hands movement will be important here, but first let's talk about your body, torso and your legs. So, standing, this 并不 position, like before. The basic feeling is like anomaly, like water pushing you, feel this force moving your body. At the same time, you feel resistance on the other side. So, if you feel some force, some flow pushing you forward, you feel resistance on front side of your body. Then, opposite. It's some basic feel. But now it becomes more complex, and now the movement will be longer than when practicing Molly in Jandra. We did short movement, still at the beginning relatively big movement, so beginner can feel this movement. But it was like shifting weight from 55% on back part of your foot to 55% on front part of your foot. Now it will be from 7 in back to 7 in front. This is how they describe this in Chinese. Hou Qi Qian San. Back 7, front 3, and then opposite. Qian Qi Hou San. Front 7, back 3. They don't say 70%, 30%, they say 7 parts, 3 parts. So it's not so much precise, and it's better because you don't need to be so much precise. You don't need to think if it's 71 or 72 or 67%. It's about 7 parts, 3 parts. So you could start from body standing straight. Don't forget about those basic demands of the Jandra postures. Now I will not repeat them, but if you forget them, move back to the first lesson. Try to remember the basic demands for the body in Jandra, because you will need to practice according to those demands also when you do Shi Li. So comparing to Mo Li in Jandra, the movement is bigger, 7 in back to 7 in front, feeling some force moving you, feeling resistance of your body, overcoming some resistance, but at the same time you don't think too much about trying to overcome some resistance, but like leading some strength, some power, some energy with your body, and overcoming the resistance with this power, so internal power, internal strength. Stop at the beginning, stop for a relatively long time. Don't try to make it forward, backward, forward, backward. Slowly, 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 slowly. Several seconds forward movement. Stop. And for several seconds practice kind of Zhanzhuang without moving, without thinking about forces, just relaxing. With weight, 7 parts in front of your feet. After several seconds, feeling some energy moving you, feeling overcoming resistance with back of your body, back of your head, back of your legs, everywhere. Several seconds, stop for several seconds and change again. So this was the most basic Molly. Here the differences in the size of the movement. Then you will practice also a bit more complex Mollies. And here, with this shitty exercise, it will become already a bit more complex. So there will be this main idea, but there will also be idea of some more forces. So when your weight is more on here, 7 and back, knees slightly bent, and now this idea with your legs, you push to the ground, so the power from the ground is going through your body and is directed from the ground forward. Then stop. When you're moving back, not just moving back, use your mind, use those feelings, like some force pushing you, overcoming resistance with back of your body. But here additionally think about like trying to sit down as if there was some wooden board or wooden stick. Here you're sitting on this with your buttock and you're slightly sitting down, so it's bending a little bit. So again you have this idea of body sinking, gravitation pulling you down, and creating this force of the buttocks pressing this wooden board or wooden stick which is bent. Then stop, several seconds, and again change direction. So with forward movement, this idea of your legs pushing toward the ground, feet pressing the ground, the force from the ground transfers through your body forward. When moving back, this idea of sitting down, so sinking of your body. So it's like you normally trying to push something, you push with your leg to push forward. If you're trying to pull something, you're very often sitting down, using weight of your body, using the power of gravitation. So it works the same way. Now, next thing. Imagine as if your both legs were connected. In Jandra, we're talking about keeping something between your both legs. Here we could think about something like, for example, maybe there are many springs. Here, horizontally, between your both legs, there are many springs. Okay, and let me start again with weight more on back, 7 in back. Legs pushing, force from the ground, moving through my body, directed forward, body pushing forward, and at the same time, some slight idea as if squeezing all those springs. Again, after several seconds, stop. Forget about springs, forget about forces, some basic elasticity, like in basic Jandra when you were focusing on relax, and then there will be changing direction. So, idea of sitting down. Now the force is going down, sinking, up, back, pushing back. At this time, idea is as if stretching those springs between your both legs. Squeezing with forward and with backward movement, like pulling, stretching them. When you stop in final positions, the springs disappear and new springs appear. So it's not like you start and you're squeezing them and then you let them expand and push your legs outside. No, it's squeezing, stop, springs, disappear. Now your legs are closer to each other than at the beginning, so the new springs which appeared are shorter. So now you will stretch those springs with body moving back, sitting down. Okay, when you stop, the distance between your legs is as if a little bit bigger. So springs disappear, springs appear again, but those are longer. Okay, so with this forward movement, you do this idea of closing, so the closing between legs. When legs are coming closer to each other, so this very often we call opening, closing. When hands, legs moving apart, it's called open. Closer to each other, it's called closing. You need to realize this because this term kai, he, opening, closed is used also in different way in internal martial art. But here we are talking just about changing the distance of between our arms or between our legs. So this closing between legs, this will be opening between legs. So you could start from practicing like this. You forget about your arms and focus on your body. Legs, feet pushing ground, body pushing forward, some closing between legs, some slight idea of squeezing springs. Because every movement you do, there should be idea of overcoming some resistance while at the same time trying to keep relaxed. But not being completely relaxed, because you will lose this feeling. And maybe even if you don't lose it, you have a feeling that you have this kind of perception that you have this feeling. If it's all in your mind, it is wrong, because it's about coordinating your mind and body, not just working with your mind. Even if that use mind, not force, it means that not typical use of force. Your body, your muscles also become activated in this kind of practice. So, actually here, forward is the main direction, but at the same time think about this pushing to the ground, power from the ground coming forward through your body. Some idea of closing, squeezing between your both legs. Then, when moving back, this backward is the main idea, pushing back is the main idea. At the same time, sitting down, thinking, and stretching, opening between your both legs. Then, there will be one more idea, but this is even more subtle. So, forward, backward, and even this standing up, sitting down was also quite big, but not too big. You don't want to be like moving up like this and becoming uprooted. Okay, you move, you have this idea of pushing from the ground, but not moving too high. And then you have this some idea of sitting down and moving back. So this is smaller maybe. Then this closing, opening between legs is still smaller. And there's something more. And here, the movement will be still smaller. This will be just very slight, very light idea. This will be idea of twisting your legs. Like twisting inward, this. With inward, out. Inward, out. I demonstrated with one leg with big movement. But have this idea that your both legs, when moving forward, remember about those other forces about which I was talking when doing this forward movement, have some slight idea of your legs as if trying to twist inward. Stop. Several seconds. And when moving back, have this slight idea of your legs trying to move out. Just very slight idea, very small move. Okay, but you have this, like, it feels a little bit as if your legs were longer, reaching your shoulders. So there's this twisting here. It's also here. Front of your body is kind of closing like this, and back opening, like becoming wider. And opposite. Moving back here in front. There's feeling of opening, and back there's some feeling of close. So this is the main ideas. I will not talk about too many details during this lesson. Some things I will introduce with next series. So first, we will practice this first one, pink way, in a bit simplified way. It will be easier. Then, when I will introduce next series with next details, those details will be valid also for pink way shielding. So when you move back to pink way shielding, you will try to work with more details, those details which will be introduced later. Not too many things at once. So I explained some basics of how to use your body, of course, with leading everything with your mind, trying to get some feeling. Now let's talk about hands, arms. I will come a bit closer. So, piętwej szyli will be pushing forward, and then there will be pulling back. Pushing forward. Stop for several seconds, remember. No hurry. Don't be impatient. Not forward, backward, but stop. And this stop becomes kind of jandra, which you practice just for a few seconds. Then slowly pulling back and stop. And again, several seconds, kind of jandra with weight more on your heels, more on balls of your feet here, more on heels here. 7 in front, 7 in back. When you do this movement, usually we use idea as if you were standing in water up to your chest level, somewhere here, below your chest, and there is a wooden board floating on surface of water, and you put your palms and your forearms on top of this wooden board. Of course, your whole body still feels as if it was in water, because when it's moving, you feel something like resistance of water everywhere, not only here in this part, but here also. But to get some idea what you want to feel here with your arms, you could use this idea of water up to your chest level and this wooden board. So when you're pushing forward, not just pushing forward, you still need to remember all the details which I already explained. Legs pushing toward the ground, body pushing forward, closing between, like an idea of twisting inward. And then when body moving back, some sitting down, opening between legs opening out. So, but in short, I will just say forward movement, backward movement. But don't forget that it's much more inside. So with this so-called forward movement, I'm pushing this wooden board away from my body. Then stop for several seconds. Then, when body moving back with all those other ideas of forces, all those directions of movement, I'm trying to pull this wooden board closer to my body. Palm, forearm is on top of this board, but try to keep your elbow all the time lower than your palm, than your wrist. It shouldn't become like this here, but in the final position, still elbow a bit lower than your palm. So you should not straighten your elbow too much, because if your palm is at chest level, while your shoulder is of course higher, and you straighten your arm, elbow for sure will be higher than your palm. No, you don't want to do it like this. Why not? Because this is related to practice with partner, in which your hands are above opponent's hands and you want to control his hands. For example, you're pushing, and when your elbow is lower, you have control over his hand. If you push with your elbows moving up, you lose control and you could easily be attacked by your opponent or in your training partner when doing some of our exercises. So, how much stretching the arms? If you remember the idea that elbow should be lower than your palm, while your palm is at chest level, you will not need to think about it anymore. This principle will decide everything. If you extend your arm more, your elbow will move higher than your palm, and this will be wrong in this exercise, because of course there might be different situations, so not always like this, but in this basic exercise and some related exercise, it will be very important. How close toward your body can you pull? Not too close. So when we were practicing Zhang, I said that the distance between palm, wrist and body should be like 1.5 of such stretched palm. Now it's a bit smaller, like one such stretched palm. So you stretch here, your thumb, here small finger. So the distance between here and here is the distance between your body and your wrist. The angle here at the elbow will be close to 90 degrees, maybe even a bit smaller, but not much smaller. Here, maybe this will be okay. Not like this. Like this, you have not strong structure. You want to have a relatively strong structure. So, keeping this idea of roundness, of embrace. This is the movement, but there is this idea of push. So wooden board away, stop, pulling it toward your body. You could also think about your fingers connected to some object at some distance from you. So maybe there is some tree, 10 meters, 20 meters, 50, 100 or more in front of you. Maybe some building, not something very close. It's better to work with idea with idea of something which is farther away. So at some distance from me there's some tree, and I think that there are some springs which are connected to that tree. So the tree is in the center, my palms are here, so the springs are going like this, and they're connected to my fingers, to each tip of each finger. So I'm pushing like this, but not to this point, but to the point which is much farther. I'm starting for a moment, and then I start pushing this wooden board away. And with tips of my fingers, I'm squeezing those springs connected to that tree somewhere there. So slowly, whole body is moving, and I'm squeezing those springs. Stop. The springs disappear. This is very basic, like Jangjuan, like one of health postures, but with arms more extended and with weight 7 in front. Then new springs appear, and those springs are shorter. So now when I'm moving back, sitting down, opening and so on, pulling this wooden board closer to my body, with my fingers I'm stretching those springs, pulling those springs, stretch. Okay, so I have idea of some resistance, of overcoming some resistance, but use mind, not force. So try to have this feeling that you not using your muscles, but the flow of energy, of the strength, is overcoming the resistance. So here I use the idea of spring being squeezed, more springs, some more springs being squeezed, then when you stop they disappear, then new shorter springs appear and you stretch them. They disappear, for a moment there are no springs, the several seconds new springs appear, again longer, so you squeeze them. Another possibility, another idea Master Yao is usually using is that there are some springs, and when you squeeze them, you squeeze those springs so much that they stop being elastic anymore. So because they stop being elastic, when you stop there's no feeling of force. Then they are squeezed so much and not elastic anymore, but you stretch it and becoming elastic again, creating resistance, but then it's like straightening, it's becoming just like iron rod, not spring anymore. So when you stop here you will not feel any force from there. Okay, you could relax, and when you start pushing you feel resistance, and it's becoming spiral, becoming spring again. So this is one of the possibilities, and another is thinking that the spring just completely disappear and new shorter or longer springs will appear. When talking about body and legs, I explained that there are ideas of some more forces there. It's a bit complex. The same with your arms. Usually there are at least 3 forces, 3 directions of forces, because we normally thinking about 3-dimensional space. So thinking about 3 directions of forces, because in practical use, when you're using some force, you doing something, you hitting or pushing. If it's only just hitting or just pushing, it's very low level. the idea in each one, but also in traditional internal arts, is multi-directional force. Your action is not just one action. There are many different things in one action. So you hitting, for example, but the came contact with opponent arm. So you could hit and redirect his arm at the same time. You could do hitting action and through the arm and tension affect opponent balance. So it's not using one force, just like maybe forward straight, it would be just hitting. But at the same time, maybe some pressing down, maybe some rotation one way or the other, maybe some expanding, maybe some expanding, opening, maybe some closing inward. There might be more forces used in one action. So you should not think just about one force, one direction. So normally, learning Kalisz, we have one direction, which is the main direction, but also at least two supplementary directions, maybe more, usually at least two. So when I'm pushing forward, all those ideas, all those feelings about which I was talking before, remember that those ideas are used to get some feeling. This feeling is important. You have this feeling like overcoming some resistance, like your force, your strength reaching somewhere farther away. Oh, this is what is important. And resistance of some springs, for example, the idea that they are connected to something which is farther away is something which helps you to develop this feeling. I will talk about this extending your intention later, but now let's talk about the directions. So, when doing this pushing forward, at the same time, I'm a little bit pressing down, like trying to move to push this wooden board which is floating on surface of water a bit underwater. So it's like you pushing when having arms over opponent arms. Usually you push downward to control his arms. Without this, your control will not be so good. When pulling back, we will use idea of this wooden board sticking to your palm, forearm. So it will be opposite action, like trying to lift it a little bit. Important is that you don't think about lifting it with your shoulders. Shoulders relaxed, body as if slightly sitting down, but here some idea of lifting. So we're forward. There's also some additional very small downward force, very small downward movement. Very big visible forward, but a little bit down. Backward, the main movement, but at the same time a bit lifting up. And the third direction. Here you could imagine as if there are many springs here, horizontally connecting your both arms. Here between your fingers, your palms, forearms, elbows, upper arms, everywhere are those springs, like between legs. And you will squeeze springs, you will stretch them. At the same time, when you're squeezing and stretching the spring between your legs. So, pushing forward, you remember there was this closing between legs. So, some idea of closing here also between your both arms. Stop, springs disappear. Then, when moving back, sitting down, opening here, pulling back, some lifting up, very small. Also some small idea of opening, stretching those springs. between your legs, between your arms. So this feeling is in your whole body. And it's also related to this idea of twisting inward and twisting out. So inward, closing front part of your body, outward, like open front side of your body. So main direction, forward, additional, a bit down, a bit inward. Then the main direction, backward, additionally, a bit up, a bit open. Very important to have clear idea which is the main direction, which are additional directions. When you practice with partner and we work with main direction and additional directions, you should be very clear about what you actually doing. Very often beginners, instead of like pushing, focus too much on pressing down. Okay, pressing down also could be used in many situations, but when we're talking about this, you should be clear about this. You should know what you are doing. You should feel what you are doing. What is in your mind should be expressed in your body. And teacher this way will be able to see if you are able to control your body, if there is coordination between your mind and your body. Because sometimes it's like some students, of course, some are more able, some less able, and some might have some problems learning. But very often it's like some people have big problems at the very beginning, but it doesn't mean that they should not learn. It very often happens that after some time of practice, they really improve their mind and body coordination. So this practice of each one is very good for them. But at the beginning, very often, some people think that they are doing one thing, that their main movement, main force, the big movement is in some direction, but actually they are doing it a different way. Sometimes they just do something different because they misunderstood something, they forget something, teacher told them something, but they start doing it in different way. So during the process of study, it's very important to have contact regularly, so the teacher can check the situation of a given student and help him in the most efficient way. Okay, anyway, you should know here. Forward, backward, those are the main directions, and those other directions are additional supplement. One more thing about this hand movement will be this opening and closing between your hands should not be too big. So maybe you will see in some schools they do it like this, but not here, not in our school, not in this exercise. Sometimes we will do different movement on purpose, but you should know what you are doing. This way also it will be easier to control what you are doing. Teacher will be able to see better if you're making progress, if you're controlling your body, if you have mind and body coordination. Also, if you are able to understand and to remember the instruction, because this is just the first stage, the first steps in your study. So the communication between teacher and student must be built to make further study efficient. So here the distance between hands should not change too much. There are those springs which you are stretching, you are squeezing, but have a look at my elbows, for example. They are coming closer to each other. They are moving apart. So here between elbows, the change is quite big. But look at tips of my index fingers. So please notice, if you are looking at tips of my index fingers, when I do this movement, distance between them is basically not changing. They are moving on two parallel lines. My both palms are very close to the central line here. I'm not opening like here. I'm doing it this way. So distance between elbows, you see, it's becoming bigger. Also, if you look at my forearms, here is the place which we use for contact in pushing hands. Of course, in many schools they use palm, they use wrist, but when you practice pushing hands just for the sake of pushing hands, it's okay, it's nice, soft play. But if you're thinking about preparation for serious fighting with whole power, full contact, then opponent's attack is coming. You're not trying to make contact with your wrist, with your palm. There's big risk of injury this way, but he's hitting, you are hitting, but at the same time very often there comes contact somewhere on your forearms which you are also using. So contact is in forearm, and typical in standard exercises is somewhere here. If I would have a watch on my wrist, the point of contact I would try to keep it behind the watch, not here on the wrist, but somewhere here. So this is very important point, and when I do this, distance between tips of my index fingers is not changing. I demonstrate like this. See, but here, wrist and forearms, there is some opening, meaning the outward movement. So this is how we do this. Sometimes you want to open opponent more, but when you open him more, you open yourself more. And this way you are learning something which, when you, for example, opponent is coming, or you're pulling him or absorbing his force, very slight movement here, but your palms are still very close to the center. So this is how you should practice this pinked way, Shi Li. Not this way, but this way. I will demonstrate this vertically, so you can see the movements. It's like here, see? Distance between tips of my index finger is not changing. Pushing, pulling, some bending of my wrist, so bending wrist like this, some opening outward here. So when you are pulling, bending wrist this way, in final position, it creates this idea of roundness, of embracing something, like in the postures, for example this one, similar to this one. but with palms facing ground, not toward body, but like this. But here inside, there's feeling that there is something around. So when I pull, at some moment I don't pull anymore, because as if there was something solid here which stops further movement. And I start pushing, my fingers still pointing a bit inward, and gradually more forward. Here, this kind of. So, summarizing the Ping Bu Ping Tui Shi Li. Starting, weight 7 in back, hands here, about this level, legs pushing the ground, so the power from ground is coming through your body, is directed forward. So the main idea is pushing forward with your whole body, some idea of closing, squeezing between your legs, some slight idea of twisting your legs inward, and here the movement like this, but the idea is the main forward, some slight idea of pressing down, and some idea of pressing inward. This pressing inward, closing inward is everywhere. Your legs, your arms, your body front part are like closing inward. Then you stop. Remember that the elbow in the final position should still be not like this, but lower than your palm. Stay in this position for several seconds, like practicing such a jump run for several seconds, just relaxing, and then body pushing back, sitting down, gravitation pulling you down, feeling of sinking toward your heels, body pushing back, opening between legs, some idea of twisting outward, and hands mainly pulling back, some idea of lifting up, but body sitting down, here some lifting up, not using your shoulders relaxed, some idea of open. Very slowly, it is said that for a beginner, Yue Man, Yue Hao, the slower the better. So that doesn't need to be very, very slow, but relatively slow, so you can actually feel some things, you can feel your body, not just doing the movement. So relatively slowly, so you feel like moving in water, overcoming some resistance, whole body and arms like moving in water, in mud, something creating resistance. At the same time, like there were some springs which you are pressing, squeezing, or stretching them when doing the opposite movement, and so on. I was already explaining all those details. So it seems like there are many details. At the beginning, you just try to focus on them one by one, but gradually it just should become one feeling, one force, everything coordinated, everything connected. It's not many details, it's just one thing. What is important, that what you are trying to do, okay, you know the main points, but practicing gradually, you want to have this feeling of overcoming some resistance, while at the same time staying relaxed, not becoming stiff, developing this feeling of this force, of this strength, and trying to make this feeling very unified, very homogeneous, I would say. So there should be the same feeling, the same amount of force everywhere on your surface of your body. Of course, if talking about arms, you should remember that one is like idea of bigger force, so there's also big movement, and there are two additional forces. So you have idea that they are smaller, not that big, smaller, very small forces, so also very small movement in those additional directions. And later there will be time to learn changes, changing all the time. Force, bigger, smaller, appearing, disappearing, confusing opponent. But first step in learning is to keep some steady force. Throughout the whole movement, you're trying to keep the same amount of force, the same speed, not like bigger, smaller force or faster, slower, but all the time the same speed. Slowly, slowly, then stop. Also, what is important is that when one moves, everything moves. One stops, everything stops. So it shouldn't be like, now I start the movement, now I completed the body movement, because it's 7 in front, I cannot shift weight more, and then only moving my hands. This is what usually happens at the beginning, but you should try to coordinate body movement with hands movement in such a way that they start at the same moment and stop at the same moment. Now I'm just standing, 7 in back. Start, slowly, 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 slowly. Stop, 7 in front, and I completed my hands movement exactly at the same time. Now please notice that in this position the body movement is quite short. So hands movement longer, body movement shorter, and you want to start them and stop them at the same time, which means that body movement needs to be slower and hands movement must be faster in order to coordinate them this way. Here, stop, and then moving back the same way. Body moving very slowly, slower than your hands. So you stop those movements at the same moment, and stop. You stop them at exactly the same moment. So this was the second lesson. Some very basic introduction to Pingbu, Pingtwei, Shili, the most basic of Shili exercises. When introducing next Shilis, I will give some more details. So gradually you will learn something new, but at the same time you will move back to the things which you learned before. You will learn something new, but a lot of what you will do in the new exercise will be the same which you already did, what you already learned, with some small changes. So in the program there are many exercises, but it's not really so much. It's like all the time adding something small, making some change, giving you some more ideas, but all the time with each next exercises it's moving back to the things which you learned before, to the basic principles, repeating the basic principles. Of course, so it's not so much complicated. It's not really so much stuff. You learn, but it's not possible to talk about everything at once. Even Yiquan founder Wang Qiangjai said and wrote somewhere that each one is simple in form, but is rich in content, in the inside content. So you should not think that each one is so simple. It seems simple, but there is a lot to learn, and it needs learning more and more, repeating some things. Even if it's simple things at high level, it will be just one thing. But before you realize this, because you perceive this as one thing, you must to approach this one thing from various directions, from many points of view to finally be able to understand what it's about and to practice in the proper way. Thank you.